Looking one of the most unique airplanes of World War II and one of our proudest possessions. The P-38, when it was developed, became armed with teeth. Centralized armament in the nose, has 4 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. The Army Air Force evaluated the combat performance of the P-38's nose-mounted guns compared to wing-mounted guns, found the P-38's armament to be totally superior. The P-38 could strike targets more accurately and at longer ranges with a concentrated cone of bullet dispersion. Also, she has in her guns, the guns are slightly elevated, which means just a couple of degrees. So when that bullet travels through that muzzle and out into the air, it's at a slightly elevated angle, and then by 2,000 yards, the bullet will drop directly in the pilot's sights. So it's super accurate and super effective. Bombs production on the E-type began in September of 1941. 210 were built. The next version was the P-38F, introduced pylon racks, which would carry either bombs or droppable fuel tanks, which would extend the range. The museum's P-38J, which was built in Burbank, California, delivered into service in May 1944. It has the distinction of being the 5,018th P-38 built, which is approximately half the number of total P-38s that were built. It was assigned to the 483 Air Base Squadron right here in Santa Maria. At the end of the war, it became a replacement training unit and was shipped off to Hangar College. Planes of Fame acquired this beautiful aircraft in 1959. In 1988, it was restored to flight thanks to a generous donation from Bob and Josie Pond. You may recognize that name if you look at our pond hangar. You'll see their name up on the hangar walls. In many ways, the Lightning shadowed the coming jet age. Just a couple of more things. Let me see. Okay, so in many ways, the P-38 is a fantastic airplane, but it was not without problems. In the early days of development, this plane had a terrible, what we call a tail flutter, leading to compressibility issues. That compressibility issues are something that happens when the dense air around the control surfaces is no longer effective. What the effect of that is, the pilot loses total control of the airplane. Now, one of the many fixes that was suggested, and then eventually all these fixes did work, if you look closely at the booms coming off the wings and where they attach to what we call the empennage. The empennage is the tail assembly. And you'll see right at the attach point of the booms to the empennage, there's a double row of rivets around the boom. What that purpose of that was to remove the empennage off the airplane, put a steel ring inside so the bolts and could have something to hang on to. But the end result was that the empennage was now changed 1 or 2 degrees angle of attack, which helped reduce some of the flutter. So you'll see that on every P-38, that ring of rivets right at we call that the rotation point. Today, our pilot is Chris Fahey, and he will be starting up shortly. He's doing his walk around now, and once he's satisfied that everything is in place, then he'll climb aboard and give the okay, and we'll get this going. And this is Chris, our good friend, Chris Fahey. By the way, folks, he could fly anything, almost everything here, except right now, he's going to fly the P-38, and I think you're going to see a fantastic show.
Oh yeah.
Some of the other fixes for that tail floater issue would have been counterbalances, and you'll see one on top, one on the bottom. The plane has fierce armament. This is also the type of plane that was used in 1943 to shoot down a very infamous Japanese naval commander. He was in charge of the entire Pacific. His name was Isoroku Yamamoto. We sent out a group of P-38s, and I believe it was 4, to intercept him as he was traveling from his home base to do an inspection tour. And unfortunately, he was jumped by 4 P-38s. He did have some protection escorts, but they were quickly eliminated. They're nowhere near as good as our P-38s. Now Chris is going to be flying over our heads. He's going to make a few passes over the museum, and this is a very exciting moment, not for all of you, but even for us, the people who are here every day. So we don't get to see this every day, but we know when something's cooking. We'll come in earlier in the week, and we'll see pilots working on their aircraft, getting it ready for flight. Some of our aircraft are in better condition than the day they came off the factory line. And this is the gosh honest truth. Now some of our planes are 80 years old, and they fly better today than they did back then. Which also makes the FAA very happy.
Oh yeah.
I volunteered to take a back seat next to Chris and say, yes, ma'am. You have a question?
What kind of engines does this P-38 have?
These are Allison engines. I believe they're 1,720 cubic inch displacement, producing a good amount of horsepower. I could tell you in a second. She could take one center line bomb of about 1,000 pounds. The horsepower is probably up around 1,500 to maybe 1,700 horsepower. I don't have the figures in front of me right now, but she's ferocious with those Allison engines, and they are souped up. Right now, Chris is going through his checklist. Yes, ma'am.
Is that the exhaust coming off the top, like near?
Well, those are the superchargers. Here's an interesting fact about the superchargers. Superchargers run very hot. They have to be cooled. But one of the things the pilots learned back during the war was when it was getting dark, and when you can't find your way back to your home base. In the case of the P-38, no GPS. Everything was navigation by the pilot. And he couldn't find his way back in the darkness. He would look out over at his superchargers. Superchargers run very hot. And believe it or not, it was that glow from the superchargers that gave the pilot comfort. And he knows, okay, everything is running great. I'm going to make it back. Here's a very interesting story about the P-38 and the flight of P-38s pilots were flying up the coast from San Diego, and they spotted a blue plane flying on the coast at the same altitude. Well, it turned out it was an FR-1 fireball. We have the last remaining fireball here. The fireball pilot had a propeller and a jet in the back, which you couldn't tell that jet engine was there. The P-38 pilots flew up next to the fireball pilot. They were trying to entice him into maybe a game of tag or something like that. Well, he wasn't buying it. So the fireball pilot just kept flying. Then he had a great idea. He shut his main engine down, feathered the prop so the lead edge of the prop faces into the wind. And the pilots, the P-38 pilots, are flying around him doing these barrel rolls. And they cannot believe what they're seeing. This guy is flying without a propeller. A jet engine was